and folks can review back to it later. Alberto?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the third year of our series on diversifying political engagement, in which we examine what are the barriers that different communities in our state face with regards to having the political voice and representation that they ought to have, and as well as what are strategies, what have we learned along the way about what works to get people to more actively engage in civic participation, advocacy, and public policy as voters, as citizen lobbyists, as candidates for office, as appointees to advisory boards, and so on and so forth. So we're very excited for our conversation today. And just for context, this is the Ed Pastor Center, named for Arizona's first Latino congressman. And our mission here is to prepare students and community members for effective advocacy and civic and political engagement. So we're very grateful for our really amazing panelists that are joining us for today's conversation. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Alberto. Like Alberto said, welcome to the discussion today. My name is Tiffany Thornhill. I'm the program manager here in the Congressman Ed Pastor Center for Politics and Public Service. I also serve for the Commission of African American Affairs as co-chair of the Education Pillar and chair of the Justice Pillar. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you everyone who is watching the replay afterwards. We are so excited for this discussion. We know this discussion is going to be timely, necessary, and needed right here on this time. So as we celebrate the last day of Black History Month, it is our honor to bring you this discussion. Before we get started, as we always do with our DPE events, I'm going to read to us a passage. The passage I'm going to read is a song by Billie Holiday. The song is called Strange Fruit. Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. Now that we have set the stage for this conversation today, let us all prepare to listen, to contribute, and to participate in this very timely discussion. First, I want to thank the late Congressman Ed Pastor for this platform, for this ability to bring these conversations to you, because without him and his legacy, we wouldn't be here today. So we want to say thank you. Now let's get started. First, let's go ahead and bring up one of our first panelists to introduce themselves, Pastor Warren Stewart, Sr.
Greetings, and it's a privilege to join all of the other panelists, and thank you for sponsoring this. I am Warren A. Stewart, Sr., Senior Pastor of the First Institutional Baptist Church. We have been engaged in Jesus and justice for now almost 50 years, and I'm privileged to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart, for joining us. Let's have Executive Director Jerry McPherson come up and introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Jerry McPherson, Executive Director for the Arizona Commission of African American Affairs. As the name suggests, we are a state agency that is responsible for working with the governor, state legislature, our state agency executives, as well as nonprofit and other organizations that represent the Black and African American communities to advocate for the needs of our constituents. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Looking forward to the conversation. The moments that I spent with fellow panelists is it's certainly going to prove to be a fruitful discussion, and looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Executive Director McPherson. Miss Angela Phoenix.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Phoenix, and I am on my fourth career after spending many years in the Phoenix community. I'm currently a regulatory consultant for a company named TCA that provides business and consulting services for rural and independent telecommunications providers. For many years when I was in the Phoenix community, I worked with Greyhound, Dial, Viad, and other organizations. And I would just like to say I'm very happy to be here with everybody.
Thank you, Miss Angela, for being here with us. Cordero.
Thank you, Tiffany. Excuse me for my voice. My allergies are really doing a number on me today. But my name is Cordero Holmes. I am a student at Arizona State University studying a master's in public administration as well as criminology and criminal justice. I am a Phoenix native as well as a Donald Waltham Nation enrolled member and grew up in Buckeye Road. Buckeye Road community member is what I say, which is a historical Black community here in the city of Phoenix. And as a director of operations at Progress Pushers, I work with youth, at-risk youth, just getting them on the right path. I'm glad to be here, Tiff.
Thanks so much for being here, Cordero. Dr. Armstrong.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Raquel Armstrong. I am a presidential postdoctoral fellow at the Mary Lou Fulton College for Teaching and Learning Innovation, where my research really specializes around educational leadership and intersects with policy and advocacy. I'm a former educational practitioner and been involved in the civic engagement space in Ohio for a number of years prior to moving to the Phoenix area. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Armstrong. Dr. Coley.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. Sorry about that. It's been a morning. My name is Dr. Brooke Coley. I am the founding executive director of the Center for Rare Justice at Arizona State University and also a professor of engineering. I came to Arizona by way of the East Coast, so I'm very much a transplant here. But as an engineer, I've been working to advocate for justice and spread a new paradigm of innovating through the lens of love. And so I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Coley. Councilmember Hodge.
Good afternoon. Well, I guess it's still good morning. Good morning, everyone. I apologize. I'm just getting into my office, and if my lighting is a little off, I apologize. I am Burdetta Hodge. I am a Tempe City Council member, a very proud governing member of Tempe Union High School District for the last 8.5 years, also a commissioner for the state of Arizona, and just finishing up my time on President Biden's Education Task Force nationally. And I'm very proud and honored to be here with Miss Tiffany today, and with everybody who's on this panel. I'm looking excited to have a robust conversation for, to continue on with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hodge. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here. I am excited for this discussion. I am so honored to have been able to curate this panel here with all of you here. Your voices are powerful. So before we get started, if Councilmember Hodge wants to fix her lighting just a little bit so we can take a screenshot.
Give me 1 second. I've got to.
Okay. All right. We typically do this at the end of the discussion, but a couple of our panelists are going to have to drop off early. So we want to make sure we get it in while everyone is here. So let's go ahead and ask Alberto, Francis, and Sophia to come on camera. So Francis and Sophia are two of our staff assistants here in the Congressman Ed Pastor Center for Politics and Public Service. Francis is studying social work and is a Master in Social Work student and is our intern. And Sophia is studying tourism hospitality, I believe, and is one of our assistants. All right, so it looks like we're almost ready. Councilmember Hodge,
Can you guys see me or?
it was better when you had it closed.
Okay, let me try that.
All right, let me get the snipping tool ready. There you go.
Is that
All
better?
right. Yes, much better. Cordero, no peace signs in the camera, please. All right, is everyone ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's get started with the panel today. All right. So first question is, what are some of the most significant systemic challenges that the Black community faces in accessing and influencing political and civic spaces? So this one we have Executive Director McPherson, Dr. Coley, and Councilmember Hodge lending to. And Pastor Stewart, if you have a specific question you'd like to lend to, can you let us know in the chat? All right, who wants to go first? Executive Director McPherson?
I was looking to yield to some of my colleagues, but I'll go ahead and get started. But systemic challenges that the Black community faces in accessing and influencing political and civic spaces. When I think about this question, surely we can kind of talk about the systemic, steps and procedures that have been put in place historically. I'll just kind of answer this from a kind of present day perspective, kind of giving my perspective with the commission. I will tell you there's it's not recent, it's kind of been years in the making where they some active effort to limit our access to the ballot box. And I think so from that, that's just like a a tactical thing that's happening. But I think going one layer deeper than that, it's this idea that's really been pushed out through the media that our vote doesn't matter or our vote doesn't count, and bigger than any of the obstacles, physical obstacles or barriers that they can put in front of us. I think cementing the idea that our vote doesn't count or our engagement doesn't matter, I think that is one of the more detrimental systemic things that can happen, is just even convincing ourselves that our vote doesn't matter. And like we hear from faces who look like us and faces who don't look like us that our vote and engagement doesn't matter. And I heard particularly during this last election cycle that someone made up the valid but obvious point: if your vote didn't matter, why would they try so hard to keep it from you? So I would think that bigger than, as I mentioned, the physical obstacles, access to the ballot box, folks getting dropped off of early voting rolls. To me, what is more concerning and more challenging is the reality and the belief, the reality that a vote does matter and the belief that it doesn't, and overcoming that that perception. So I think that would be the first thing that I would call when thinking about the question.
Can I go next?
Yes, please.
Okay, I want to touch on with Jerry just started on. It even goes a little bit deeper. It even goes to the fact that we have been as African Americans, been criminalized for things, especially like marijuana charges, that has stopped our Black community from voting. They don't feel that they can restorative justice rights because they don't get that information. They don't know how to do it. And it's taken away from the Black men, majority Black men. Black women get affected by it, but it trickles down generations. Even kids in high school, in my high schools, believe that once they get in trouble one time, that their voting rights have been taken away from them. That is something that as leaders, we have to instill in our community that is not the truth, and help restore back our African American community that has gotten their votes taken, their rights taken away from that. And second, it starts in the schools. I mean, as how the school, even down to the test scores or how they test, the way they test. Our kids are already set up for failure in some tests in math and science. And they get this idea that they're not prepared to go to college or ready to go to college, or college is not for them. So that right there, you start off on that in the beginning. That's a step in that direction. Head Start, preschool, when we don't start our kids right off in school right off, they fall behind beyond the other kids. So I think that, adding that all together, on top of the fact that we've taken DEI, another big takeaway from us, is just in ways is just marginalize our Black community away from the rights that we can have and that we should have, our community should know.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think it's important for us to understand that school to prison pipeline and the prison industrial complex and why all of these crimes are occurring and, the root causes to these systemic situations that our community has struggled with since Jim Crow. All right, who else did we have onto this question? I think it was Dr. Coley. Are you on it?
Yeah, I completely agree with what's already been stated. I think the only thing I was prepared to talk about the movie 14th and thinking about how there's a caste system that continues to go unnamed and just reformed, re-envisioned, recreated. But I would think that in addition to those things, representation and exposure to me are at the crux of how these systemic challenges for the Black community persist. I think about the college student population and when the average United States adult becomes engaged in politics and civics. And for many, that happens in college. And it makes me also think about Black Greek letter organizations and the Divine Nine specifically, because that has been, at least for me, one of the major avenues by which I became engaged and kind of got to see it from top down and grassroots bottom up. And I think if we go back to representation, where, if you break down the numbers of who's in school, it's less and less, even though the demographics are increasing, it's less and less representing Black and brown people. And so if the opportunities or the time where people commonly kind of become exposed or involved, engaged in these realms, if people aren't getting that exposure, if there's no representation to facilitate those pathways, then it's sort of like left upon young people to find their way. And this is not, serendipitously happening specifically in a time where our country is so anti-progression of Black and brown people and DEI in general.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Coley. As I'm also a faculty associate here in ASU, and I often tell my students about the privilege of being able to access higher education and what that privilege means, no matter what color our skin is. So thank you for exposing that. Dr. Armstrong, did you have something you wanted to add to this one?
Yes, I did. So, hearing what the panelists have shared, I really think about the systemic nature around misinformation and disinformation. That terminology was used a lot in this most recent election, but that is something that has faced the Black community, for a long time, right? Even when we think historically in terms of the ways that discourse framed us, in terms of Reconstruction and just sort of dismantling all of the systems and structures that we put in place for ourselves to be successful and to participate politically, and how the media and various avenues have been weaponized in order to control what we believe, what we think, what we value, what is true, what is not true. And then when we think, present day, that is sort of manifested through social media, right? In terms of not really knowing what information is real and what is not real. And then thinking that, especially when we look at, algorithms that kind of control what we see, a lot of folks really believing that certain policies will benefit them or not benefit them, or that certain political actors are for them or against them, whether or not those things actually are true, right? And so I don't think that we have been able to systematically dispel a lot of that information in order to galvanize our community in ways to presently participate in meaningful ways. You know, I think about even today, right? We know what today is supposed to represent in terms of our sort of economic impact and involvement, but yet seeing all of the language online around, well, this won't work or this will work, and this person shouldn't be trusted. And, you know, all of that has been sort of dictated by discourses that say that, you know, Black folks aren't valuable, or Black folks don't have the competence, or all of the different ways in which we are sort of discredited in the public space. And so I think systematically thinking about that discourse has truly impacted our involvement civically.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution. I think that we can also reference the most recent revision or a potential revision, or a want to revise the history of our ancestors and what enslavement actually did. So that is, you know, a huge issue in our community. Thank you so much, everyone, for lending to that conversation. Question 2. This one states, how have historical and structural inequities shaped current barriers to political engagement for the Black community? This one I'm going to lend to Pastor Stewart first.
Thank you very much for that. How have historical and structural inequities shaped current barriers to political engagement for the Black community? Well, systemic racism is the DNA of the United States of America. There is no aspect of our everyday lives where systemic racism does not negatively and adversely affect people of color. And actually, it affects all people. That's the challenge. Those who perpetrate systemic racism don't realize that they are also doing damage to themselves. But there is not one aspect from the moment people of color and Black people in particular get up in the morning to when they go to bed, we are affected by historical and structural inequities by the dominant white race. And I just had a conversation with a white evangelical pastor yesterday, and he admitted that they just don't get it. They don't understand what it means to be a person of color. And I tried, and you try to explain as much as you can, but when you are coming from a position of white privilege, where just the color of your skin just opens up opportunities that people of color don't get at all, it's hard for them to understand. I hope that helped to answer some of that question. I hope I didn't go too long, Tiffany.
No, you did great. That was a wonderful contribution to the question, Pastor Stewart. Thank you so much. Cordero, I see your hand. Let me let Executive Director McPherson lend to this next, and then we'll get to you.
Yeah, so I guess I'll preface my answer by saying I am a CPA by trade, advocate at heart. So just given my CPA experience and just my financial background, I am just a believer that much that ails our community can be solved through economics. And I think about the disparities in economics and how that limits our ability to engage. And the simple scenario is if you have, I guess, work and job insecurity, and you need to take time away to vote, or you need to take time away to attend a hearing, or you need to take time to visit your state representative, you just don't have that ability to do that. You don't have the confidence to do that. You don't have the flexibility to do that. You know, we see that play out and just being able to maintain, gainful employment, how childcare can be a barrier to that. So I just think of economics and, all of our country's historical, steps that have been taken to limit the access to gainful employment, the access to advancement in a career, the access to certain degrees and certifications, the access to a degree when you needed a degree to get it, when you needed a degree to get a job. And now that table has changed, has been access to capital if you're a small business owner, right? Like we know, like all of those limitations exist, and without access to gainful employment, without access to cash, to savings, you know, you got to focus on putting food on the table, and that is always going to supersede anything else going on in someone's life. If they can't keep a roof over their head, if they can't keep food on their table, if they can't keep clothes and shoes on their child's body, like those basic needs are going to supersede anything that's happened in the political spectrum. You combine that with what I mentioned earlier, just, you know, kind of, you know, the ideas that your vote doesn't matter, or that, you know, whoever is the president isn't going to affect your day-to-day life, because they compare year over year that the life hasn't changed drastically. It's changed incrementally, and you can always see incremental changes in your life, but since it's not changing drastically, there might be a sense that it just doesn't matter that much. Point being, with our limitations by way of economic, it is going to define how much we can become engaged in the political and civic space. And that is the limiting, in my opinion, one of the more limiting factors in whether we can, you know, get truly engaged to the degree that we need to be to help shape our political spectrum.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Executive Director McPherson. That's so true, because there's so many of us in the Black community who don't even understand civic engagement. They've been in survival mode for generations, where they've just been trying to make ends meet through nefarious ways, some ways, because if we think about the 90s and the war on drugs and de facto segregation and all the ways that the community found ways to survive, there's all of that struggle. And then to think about the trauma of Black Wall Street and Rosewood and the eminent domain and all the flooded towns, it's like this discouragement. And folks don't even understand that civic engagement is a thing, because they're constantly in survival mode.
Yeah, if I can just add one item to this, like there's a price we have to pay to be civically engaged, and that is a price many of us simply cannot afford.
Yes, thank you so much. Cordero, did you have thoughts you wanted to lend to this one too?
Yeah, I did. And again, please excuse me for my voice. When I think about like historical and structural inequities, I see how it is closely related to, we talked about the first question, which is the systemic challenges in political civic engagement, right? I'm as an Arizona native, I've witnessed, right, this historical racism, right, that still shapes our present being. And just a little context, I've been in and out of institutions since I was 13 years old. I've done 10 years in prison. And so when we talking about like over policing, when we talk about that school to prison pipeline, these is things that I've experienced personally. And so I think about the criminal injustice system, and I think about how, you know, Arizona has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, and how Black men are disproportionately impacted by this. I've worked with people, right, who have struggled to rebuild their lives after incarceration, only to be blocked from voting, right, when we talk about that civic engagement, only to be blocked from housing, to what Brother Jerry was talking about, right, and be blocked from certain employment opportunities. These aren't personal struggles, but they're systemic barriers. And so these are systemic barriers that have been occurring for a time being, going back to what Pastor Warren Stewart had shared about this being woven into the fabric of the country that we are currently in. And so, and Tiffany, you talked about the war on drugs and how that's contributed to mass incarceration and has created generations, right, of disenfranchisement, right? And that what that does is it blocks us from being civically engaged. And these are all historical and structural inequities that have been around only to bring us to today. And so I just wanted to share that, because there's some things that was said that I thought of. And it's, again, excuse me for my voice.
No, thank you so much, Cordero. Get you some warm water with lemon. If you have it over there, at least the warm water, soften up your voice there. But thank you for bringing your lived experience into this conversation. Listen, this panel was carefully curated for all of your powerful voices and all of the unique contributions you will give. So please speak freely as you are able to in this discussion. Okay, so those of you who are watching online, please place your questions in the chat or in the question and answer function of this webinar. We will have time in about 30 minutes 35 minutes to engage in question and answers from the audience. All right, question number 3. This one is, can you share an example of a moment or movement led by the Black community that has inspired change in political or civic spaces? First, we will lend this one to Councilmember Hodge.
Thank you. I want to just start off with one that's pretty easy that people don't even realize, the Crown Act. How that has changed how people are being hired. There are times that, and this was started by African American women. Other people jumped involved, but this was all on the backs of African American women. And the fact that people were being not given interviews because their earrings were too big or they had braids in their hair. And I can explain how that affected me when I was running for office. When I started running in 2013 for school board, I had a nice group of Caucasian women walk up to me and said, we want to help you. We want to work with you. We want to make sure you get elected. But the first thing you need to do is take your braids out of your hair. Right there told me everything that I needed to know. I had people tell me not to put my pictures on my signs or my literature. These are things that I was told as an African American running for office. As being in office, the Crown Act was passed and signed underneath in my city when I was on council, which I'm very proud of. We've also did income source resolutions to make sure that people are not being judged by just how much amount of money, or if they are on Section 8 versus they're not on Section 8 when it gets to rental. There is things that I would tell each and every one of you guys. The state level, the national level may be allowing us to be let down, but we do have local level that you can reach out to your council members and they directly impact your lives. What they're doing, you need to be asking, what are they doing with DEI? We do not need the same thing that's happening in Scottsdale. It is spreading like wildfire across the state of Arizona. Ask directly to your council members, what are you doing in this policy? What's going to happen? Because this right here will directly affect Juneteenth. It's going to affect MLK Day, all the different things, our Disability Act, everything. So when it comes to policy, this is when we really need to hammer in on it. But I just wanted to bring the Crown Act as one of the major things that we show as in this time, what we can do and to change what happens in our hiring process.
Thank you, Councilmember Hodge, for that. Thank you for sharing your personal story as well. We really appreciate all the work that you do. Pastor Stewart, did you want to lend to this question?
Sure. There are 2 instances I want to bring up. One is during apartheid in South Africa, several of us got together and were able to convince the then state treasurer to divest all of Arizona's retirement funds from companies that were doing business in apartheid South Africa. And he willingly did that back in the 1980s. And so that was a way that we were able to make a difference in a small way here in Arizona for apartheid in South Africa. Of course, the most notable one is the fight for the Martin Luther King Jr. state holiday here in Arizona. Every time it was presented, and in the state legislature, it was presented by a Black legislator. I think the first one was the late Clovis Campbell, who was the first Black senator. And I think the year after Dr. King was assassinated, he presented it. Of course, it kept being defeated. And it was ultimately defeated in the spring of 1986. And then Governor Bruce Babbitt called me on the telephone one Friday and said, Pastor Stewart, I think I have precedent that I can declare the King holiday by executive order, and I'd like to do it from the pulpit of the First Institutional Baptist Church. And so on May 18, 1986, he did that, and several Black leaders came together. But he said something very prophetic. He said, you all going to have to fight for this. And my, did we fight for it from 1986 to 1992. but it was the African American community and colleagues and allies in the white community, in the Jewish community, in the Latino community, in all strata who joined us. We formed a coalition called Arizonans for Martin Luther King Jr. State Holiday, and we kind of led the fight through 1990 and got two different versions of the King holiday passed by the state legislature, but they were overturned by opponents and disciples of the late Eben Meekum, who ran for governor and won in a fluke in 1986. And then after that, because it was there was a Super Bowl committee that tried to bring the Super Bowl to Arizona in 1993, and it was run by what was called the Phoenix 40, which was the white business corporate executives, and they wanted the holiday not for the right reasons. They wanted to get the football game here, and they led a movement in 1990 and had two different versions that were overturned on the ballot, and both of those versions were defeated in November of 1990. And then I got a call from a television anchor off. He said, "I'm calling you off the record, Pastor Stewart." He said, "We need to hear from you." I said, "Well, the people of Arizona have voted. They said they didn't want a King holiday. Let's move on." He said, "No, Pastor Stewart, please consider trying one more time." And I prayed about it, counseled a couple of people with a couple of leaders, and we started Victory Together in November of 1990. And this time, the business community didn't try to take the lead. They followed our lead. And for 2 years, we led a campaign, raised all the money necessary to fight it. And we became not the only state that had rescinded the King holiday under Governor Meekum. We became the only state to win a Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day by a vote of the people in the entire nation. And that was at a time when the African-American population in Arizona was only about 3.5 or 4%. So it was an amazing journey, and it was led by Black people, and we made a difference making a negative into a positive. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing before he goes on? Pastor Stewart, I want to tell
Yes,
you
ma'am.
this was my first real touch into politics, actually being in high school, marching along with that. So what you've done in your time is have me sitting in this office today. So I just want to thank you personally for that, because that is something that I've always wanted to tell you, but I'm telling you now that this is why I'm sitting here right now, because this got me energized to be the person I am today. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
What a beautiful testimony. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also really appreciate, Pastor Stewart, how you shared that story, because there were so many things inside of that, right? How the Black community tried, it got shut down. There was 2 bills passed, they got shut down. Then the white community tried, and then it didn't happen. And then Black community said one more time, calling on the Pastor Stewart. And then collaboration came, then community came together. And I think that is such a powerful testimony of that we need everybody to get things done. But the people most closest to the problem are the people with the solution to the problem. So get on board to the people who have the solution instead of trying to figure it out yourself. That's what I got out of that.
Yes, and please let me add this. Thank you so much. Please know that the business community resisted Black leadership, even after both of their propositions were defeated in 1990. And it took the late Jack Feaster, who was the general manager of SRP, to tell his colleagues of the Phoenix 40, leave Pastor Stewart alone, let him lead this, because people know that he and others want this for the right reasons. It's obvious the business community, they only wanted a King holiday to get the Super Bowl. That's the only reason they wanted it. And so, but there was great resistance. But I can say this, that we were able to form what I believe is the most diverse coalition that it had ever existed in the state of Arizona to fight for the King holiday modeled after the federal holiday. And it was just a wonderful experience. And I hope people will learn some of the lessons that we learned from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. Cordero, you want to lend to this one before we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about a young councilwoman, right? Getting civically engaged. A moment that really stands out to me is pretty recent and it's really personal to me because what I've witnessed is that because of this, I've seen young people and people who we've spoken about, right, who don't really feel like civic engagement is for them or means anything, is the movement for justice for Dion Johnson. Dion Johnson was murdered by George Cervantes, who was a DPS officer the same day George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And it's personal to me because I know Dion Johnson. Me and Dion Johnson grew up together. And so I remember thinking about like those protests, right? Starting at East Lake Park in Phoenix that were led by Black organizers from BLM and other folks. And they refused to just let the state sweep that under the rug. I think I remember being out there, right? And this is kind of like my beginnings of being engaged, right? And out here, because I mean, I was in prison from 2007 to 2017. So, and I was just really just trying to reestablish myself until 2020 when this happened. And so it was personal to me. And so I remember being out there marching and having conversations with individuals and really strategizing and thinking about like, you know, how do we demand change, right? And what that moment really showed me is the power of community-led advocacy. You know, it wasn't really just about like protesting. It was really kind of pushing for policy change and for folks to really um, take accountability, right? And so I remember some of those young leaders really challenging local leaders and whatnot, and it really creating spaces, not just for Black folks, but for all folks, right, who have dealt with some kind of police brutality here. And of course, you know, this is a similar movement that we witnessed from '92 and Rodney King to Michael Brown and Ferguson, Trayvon Martin, and then again, Dion Johnson the same day was murdered as George Floyd in Minneapolis. And so I think what I remember experiencing and really witnessing is that how we can organize, and that when we do organize, we really force the system to respond. And so that's some of the things that I think about when I think about inspiring movements for change that were led by Black folks, and it's really getting young people civically engaged.
Thank you, Cordero, for sharing that. I know a lot of us were out there for those rallies and those protests. All right, question 4. What strategies or approaches have been most effective in fostering resilience and success in Black-led advocacy efforts? Ms. Angela, do you want to respond to this one?
Yes. First, though, I'd like to, I guess, leverage off of what Councilwoman Burdetta was saying with Pastor Stewart being a good mentor. Young people should not be afraid to reach out to seek mentors, and those of us who are more seasoned should not be afraid to reach behind us to bring people up. During my days, when I first arrived at Phoenix, I didn't know anybody, but through a family friend, I came to work with Lincoln Ragsdale with their Universal Memorial Center and their insurance company. And from that, I met Bill Dickey, who happened to play golf with Joe Black, who was looking for someone to work with him at Greyhound Corporation. And that's how I got in there. You know, so it works both ways. Sometimes corporations, they just want the head count. And so when I was working with Joe Black, we were able to leverage a lot of the programs that nobody really knew what was going on. So we had a scholarship program and we were able to change the lives of hundreds of people nationwide at HBCUs and just within the community. And so in terms of strategies that can help people be more resilient, I would say number one, unity, communication, mentoring, and just reaching out and not being afraid to ask for help or being afraid to give help. Dr. Leon Sullivan, another man who I greatly admired, who worked with OICs of America, for instance, I was with Dial for 20, 30 years. And at times the budget would go up, the budget would go down, but we couldn't always support OIC in the ways that I could when I was sure no one was looking. And so toward the end, when my budgets were being cut, Dr. Sullivan was so gracious, and he always said, I know that you'll help if you can. And so that has really stuck with me in terms of what we need to do in terms of getting our community together and staying together, especially during these turbulent times, and that is to help if you can.
No, I agree. That is a powerful message, Miss Angela, that mentorship matters and that mentors should not, I just want to give one encouraging piece of advice out there for mentors is that never get intimidated by your mentees when you start to see them surpass you, because that's the goal. That's the goal, right?
You want them to exceed your expectations, and if you reach one level of success, it's okay if they surpass you. And I guess one important thing that we can do is leave our egos at the door, because what we're trying to do is do something for everyone's good, form coalitions. For instance, Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Chicanos por la Causa, those types of organizations work so much better when we're working together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miss Angela. Dr. Armstrong, did you want to lend to this one?
Sure. I think, you know, what we've heard so far, even from the last question, the lived experiences of the folks on this call, is that grassroots has always worked. Grassroots has always worked. Being able to come together to form that community, that's what has fostered our resilience, but also recognizing that within that, in that mentorship and the internal connection is the stick-to-itiveness, right? It's the follow-through that has allowed us to get where we are, to have the accomplishments that we have. You know, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago for Youth Day, for African American Legislative Conference, about, you know, what's different today, right? Is this idea that, you know, we struggle with this delayed gratification. As soon as something doesn't work, we quit. Right? As soon as, you know, we've pushed for something and we get disappointed and then we kind of let things go. Or on the flip side, we maybe get a little bit, you know, get that inch, but we don't go for the mile. We got the inch, we're happy, we quiet down, and just what it takes. I mean, we heard from the experience about, you know, pushing for Martin Luther King Day, how long that took, right? What it took to get there, you know? And so really recognizing that part of this is being able to learn from failure, right? To learn from our failures, to keep pushing and supporting one another. I think one of the things I love about getting to know some of the folks on this panel and hearing their stories is recognizing that setting things to the side. We don't always agree on everything, right? Our experiences, you know, we come with different things to the table, but being able to come together, to learn from one another, to challenge one another, to recognize that challenging one another doesn't mean that we are tearing down or trying to be the crabs in a barrel, but actually sharpening one another so that we can continue to push forward, because we are always better together. And so that is that resilience piece to me that I see, not just here in Arizona, but, you know, thinking about various movements across the United States, right? Is that sense of coalition building, right? I think sometimes we get disappointed in the ways in which people we even know personally have responded in this present time, but knowing that it isn't everybody. We need folks outside of our community to push things forward. And so, and all skin folk and kinfolk, right? So recognizing who needs to be at the table and working together to push things forward.
I knew that phrase was going to come out at one point today. All right. Thank you so much for those beautiful contributions to that question. Next question is, what role does advocacy play in addressing the unique needs and priorities of the Black community, and how can it be made even more impactful? Director McPherson, would you like to lend to this one first?
Surely. So, and again, speaking from my perspective of Executive Director for the Commission of African American Affairs. I would say my primary job is advocacy, and knowing that there's a level of access and privilege that this role offers, that I can get the ear of the governor, I can get the ear of our state legislature, I can get the ear of our state executives, and it comes a great responsibility, right? I wish, I don't know the Spider-Man line off the top of my head. Feel free to chime in on that, but it comes with great responsibility, and that's advocacy, right? And it's not enough for me to advocate for what I think we need or what I think we want or what I think the answer is. It's being intentional about getting, collective responses from everybody, in our communities. And for me, that means African American communities around the state. We know that, a lot of attention, a lot of dollars, a lot of focus comes to Maricopa County, whether it's during the election or year round. And, justifiably so to some degree. We make up roughly, I'd say, I believe 65% of the state's population is in Maricopa County, but there are people who live elsewhere. And as an advocate, it's my responsibility to hear directly from the people and carry that message. Maybe you need to cultivate it. Maybe I need to prioritize what messages, most important from the messages that I receive. But I guess I will add on to that. If you are in a position of advocacy, again, we know it comes with great responsibility, but I think it's important that we hear the term meeting people where they are, is that the people that we are advocating for may not be as educated as we are, may not be as astute, may not be as aware, but they are just, their wants, wishes, needs, and desires are just as valuable as anyone else's. And I think it's important that if you are in that position, you are meeting people where they are, understanding them at the level that they are able to communicate what it is they want, and then packaging that up in a way that is maybe that will require a different language, a different level of sophistication, a different delivery to those decision makers. So when it comes to the advocacy, I think if we are in this position, I would suggest everyone on this call is an advocate. But those that are listening, I would say we all can be advocates, because even if you are, like you may be the one in your family who is paying attention to politics, that is civically engaged. You know what your family needs. You sitting at the table with them. You understand what some of the challenges are. It is important that we are listening to those that are not as equipped for the conversations that we are preparing ourselves for, and doing what we can to be intentional, listening to those messages, cultivating in a way that that respects their perspectives, and kind of taking that step forward. So in short, I would just think about being mindful of the people that we are advocating for aren't going to be as aware as we are, and having that empathy, that understanding, that awareness. I think that will help make us better advocates, with recognition of that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Coley, you want to add to this one?
Yeah, I was getting into it. I'm just sitting here like, oh, I need to contribute. So I think that when I think about this question, E.D. McPherson spoke to us in the ally group, and I think asked something similar. What words come to mind when you think about leadership and advocacy? And I think in that session, the thing that I said was sacrifice. I think when it comes to the needs of the Black community, I'm going to come at this from the perspective of engineering, in that in the time of COVID, okay, I'll give you the example of pulse oximeters. These are the devices that go on the finger that measure oxygen levels. A lot of Black and brown people died unnecessarily because the oxygen wasn't adequately read, because it couldn't read through the pigment of their skin, which is comes back to who's designing that, who's on the team, right? So let me make another leap to that. So now in engineering, our main organization that's responsible for the accreditation of engineering programs across the country, meaning what the engineering programs are responsible for in their curricula, what's a part of the process of becoming an engineer, they've now voted as of a couple of weeks ago to remove all DEI from those standards and criteria. So why is this problematic? It's problematic because I come back around to representation. And so the folks that are in those positions, the onus is on us to advocate, because we are the ones in that space. And I mean, one person can't take on all of the issues faced in technology, but it shows how, if you have a community, I would say in a body of faculty, just to give you an idea of over 300 engineering faculty, I can comfortably say there are 5 Black faculty. And so if you don't have representation, if you don't have policies that are supporting thinking about representation and equity and inclusion as essential, not just because it's fair, this is also a crisis, a national crisis, because our technologies are not being developed with marginalized communities in mind. And so I think that advocacy becomes even more critical, but because of the representation, it kind of leaves for the people that are in those positions, in that space, it comes at a sacrifice, because even in this moment, my advocacy is still teaching my equity course, still pursuing my grants, not stopping because of these nebulous guides that are designed to impose fear. The advocacy is in continuing the work. The advocacy is in modeling practices that are inclusive and equitable, and these considerations, not just for Black and Brown scholars, but for non-Black and Brown scholars, so that they can understand the importance and also design with these aspects in mind. And so I think when I think of advocacy in this day, not enough people are willing to sacrifice their own progression. I think about the faculty, we are baited by this little tenure track carrot, and everybody wants tenure, rightfully so. But if the attainment of tenure is by achieving metrics that don't factor in the things that are impactful for you, your community, your people, then what does tenure really mean? And so until we have people that are willing to have that self-sacrifice for the collective advancement, I think that's what's needed when it comes to advocacy now. And because of the situation that the current moment has us in, it's not as easy. I get that, to make those decisions, but that's the only way we'll be able to get where we need to in terms of advocacy for Black communities. And particularly, I'm thinking about technology, because we continue to go through these phases. A long time ago, it was the internet. And then there were people that, the internet was created and it left people behind. Then we had the cell phone that left people behind. Then it was mixed reality, left people behind. And now it's AI. And so we just need to be better integrated in technology, and it's going to cause more people to be willing to do that sacrificial advocacy.
No, that's a powerful, powerful statement you just said, Dr. Coley. And, I'm a social worker, and we have a licensing body in the social work, to become a licensed social worker. And when the Council for Social Work Education, the Association for Social Work Board started to make this a requirement for a lot of social workers, what they found was seasoned social workers who were Black specifically were unable to pass the test, because their practices were not evidence-based to the test, but they were frameworks that were effective for the Black community, and they had been practicing for decades. So they go to take this test and they're failing because they're not practicing this way that is evidence-based for this license. So there's so much that we're not represented in those licensure tests, in technology, in the medical industry, in AI, especially with facial recognition. There's so much where we need, like I said earlier, those most closest to the problem are the ones with the solution to the problem, and that's in every area. Pastor Stewart, did you want to lend to this question before we moved on? No? Okay. All right. Well, we are coming up onto the time for question and answers. So this question I'm going to pose to everyone before we get into the audience questions, because we do have a lot that have come in. So this question is going to be question number 8. And this one is, let me get back to my questions. Question number 8. Black culture and brilliance continue to shape art, music, innovation, and leadership. What aspects of Black excellence inspire you the most, and how can we amplify and celebrate these contributions? Someone want to lend first?
Kendrick Lamar, they not like us.
What's up on mute?
I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming.
They not like us. That was phenomenal for what he did. And it was, I mean, he took an opportunity where he could have focused on himself, but he focused on this nation and he sent a message. A lot of people didn't get it, but I got it. A lot of us got it. I mean, brilliance. Yeah.
I'll go next, and there's a couple of things, so I'll try not to share so many because I'm sure many others have similar thoughts. But that, what Pastor Stewart referenced, like that unspoken language that exists in the Black community, that there's something that I hold dear to it, and as simple as eye contact. It could be a head up, head nod up, head nod down, or just a look away, like that unspoken language is like. I love that about us. I just really do. It's something special. But one thing that I would say, it's a gift and a curse, because when you become too good at the thing that I'm going to say, people take it for granted, and that's doing more with less, and like being able to we can go back to slavery and making feasts out of scraps, right? Like when you become too adept at doing more with less, it just gives others the idea that you don't need as many resources. And I mean, I've been in that role working for nonprofit organizations that were wholly underfunded, but we were able to still make magic. And it's kind of the idea that, well, if you was able to do all of that with no funding, then why do you need more money? You seem to be doing well just as it is. And that can be a gift and a curse. So I do appreciate our ability to do more with less and make magic out of, make feast out of scraps. But again, it just comes with the challenge that there may be someone else who do not think you need the proper resources that other groups need.
Okay, I'll go next. I believe it's our leadership. With African Americans, we can go into any room. And have you ever heard the saying that we have the biggest personalities? We have the strongest personalities. We lead by nature. We were born leaders. And that's what most people try to beat out of us, is the fact that when we go into a room, our presence and our auras are so strong that we can take over a room. And we don't use that to our benefit. Sometimes we try to shell ourselves down to fit in with the people around us instead of being that person. If I hear that enough times on the 3rd floor, Burdetta, you got the strongest personality. Well, I'm taking that as a compliment now in my life, because for the longest time, I took it as I needed to scale myself down to fit in. But if they can't fit into my world, then that's their problem, not mine anymore. And that's what we need to be teaching, is that we are leaders and we're strong, and we should be able to teach our next generation to embrace it, walk with it, and hold it with pride.
You said take up space. Oh, my bad. I was going to say, you said take up space.
Mm-hmm.
Bet.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Armstrong.
So I love that Councilmember Hodge, brought up the next generation. I think as a former school administrator, one of the things that inspire me the most is how socially aware the next generation is. That is inspirational to me. I think the piece that is often missing is the context. That's where our prior leaders can provide the context for the next generation to understand how to utilize the knowledge and understanding that they do have, right? I think, my mom is a baby boomer and my dad's actually a great generation. And in having these conversations with them, they're always like, well, your generation, isn't doing anything. And the next generation is, well, no, it's about why this needs to be an intergenerational conversation. Is there are so many things that this present generation can learn from their elders, but this present generation, they have a voice. When I was a principal, I was at a middle school, and I encouraged middle schoolers to speak at school board meetings, and they would come and it would be profound. It would be profound. And so when we create platforms for our youth to share their ideas, to speak, to have a seat at the table, I promise you they would far exceed the expectations I think we have. And I always say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are the meal, right? And so if we teach our youth that they can be there, they do not have to wait. And even if someone doesn't open the door for you, right, there's a way to kick it down. And so I think being able to give them more space to be here, to be present in these conversations, that's what's inspirational to me.
And I'll go next. Thanks, Doc. That was beautiful. Inspire, amplify, celebrate. I think about, what inspires me most is the creativity and resilience of us, right? Whether it's artists like Antoinette Colley, who was a native here, right? Whether redefining this Phoenix cultural landscape, or Black entrepreneurs like Matthew Ali and the Archwood Exchange and what them brothers is doing over there on the east side of Phoenix, really creating these spaces for economic empowerment. This is the stuff that inspires me. And then I think about we just need to celebrate one another. It's about like this collective progress, and we need to amplify each other. Whether it's in media, right? You got Brother Lloyd Hopkins and what they doing over there at STN. We need to support one another. We need to support one another, and we need to celebrate each other. And so when I think about what inspires me, it's supporting each other, community initiatives, ensuring that all of our culture here, from culture that is bringing from other places to Arizona, and recognizing the impact. That's what inspires me the most.
I'll jump in. I think about our ancestors, Octavia Butler, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde. For me, and even recently, Nikki Giovanni, it's the genius, the ground that's been laid for us of Black intellectualism and scholarship. We aren't recreating the wheel. We just need to know what the wheel was. And I think Dr. Armstrong mentioned the youth as being the inspiration. One of the things that I hope for is to be able to make the connections between our historical greatness and our younger population, because if they had this awareness, if you already knew what you came from, the path would be maybe less ambiguous, or there'd be more motivation or empowerment. But whenever I need inspiration, I go to the ancestors and that have led the way, and think about their brilliance, think about their visionary outlooks, and think about how they were disrupting long before it was safe. They were in a much less stable position than we are now, and they still challenge, and they still push, and they still resisted. And that's part of the way that we are all in the privileges that we hold now. So anyway, I just am constantly inspired by a history of greatness, and I wish that access to this truth, to that truth, wasn't denied so many students in K through 12, because we shouldn't have to wait until we're on our own, or it shouldn't have to be that if you don't have parents that are actively exposing you to this, then you never encounter it.
No, thank you so much for that, Dr. Coley. As you were speaking, there was one word that was in my mind, and it is the word Sankofa, right? To go back and get it. always go back and get that history to bring it forward into the present so that we can prepare for those who are not yet here. So thank you for bringing that into this discussion. Miss Angela, did you want to lend to this one? I think you're muted over there.
I noticed that. I think everyone has pretty much said everything that I agree with. And it's just important to use our creativity because we're hardwired. We always think of ways to get out of something if you know it's not to our advantage. And you know, I like the saying it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But I take the approach of I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. And so, in terms of coming up with partnerships and trying to think of coalitions, I don't think anything is off the table.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miss Angela. That was a wonderful way to end that question. All right. Let's move into our question and answer portion. We do have several questions from our audience here. I'm going to go ahead and fire them off. The first one, and please add your questions to the Q&A function if you have any. The first one I'm going to read off is for Dr. Coley, I believe. And I want to read it off to Dr. Coley because I know Dr. Coley has to get out of here pretty soon. Hopefully not already. But this question says, there is an attack on science. So much great funding has been pulled that was related to diversity, energy renewables, etc. How can we continue when the government keeps attacking and punishing those who are trying to make a change?
Wow, that's
You muted
That's
yourself.
yeah, I got you. That's a very powerful question. And I appreciate it. I appreciate it as an engineer who for the last 3 years worked to receive one of the highest grants available at the National Science Foundation focused on racial equity, only to have my department say that I cannot access these funds. The money is there, just sitting in an account. And you know, the language was, this is DEI. What I think is problematic is that this is a $5 million grant, a $5 million grant. And there really has been no clear language. And so the part that is super problematic is when we talk about DEI, it's been weaponized and twisted to the point that there's a misconception. I think it was mentioned earlier about misinformation. This is one of the sources, because if you try to confuse the masses that everyone's this DEI hire, or that when you a project is connected or funded in DEI, that it means that there's a compromise in its integrity, there's a compromise in its competence. That's what's happening. And so the issue, the question is, how do you operate in science and technology when these funds are being pulled? The main problem is not a consistent implementation across institutions. We were just in a meeting the other day at ASU where within the same institution, people are moving in different directions and, you know, differently with guidance. So that lets you know that there's choice and how these things are executed. And so my recommendation would be to be very in touch with your program officers that are funding the work. They are the experts. They know what the status is as it relates to your particular funding, because the guidance might be for you to stop, but my program officer has supported my work to continue. And so I think there's a need to not stop at no, like not accept no, because it's really being differentially implemented or executed. And so if that's the case, then there's a choice. We have just as much control as our colleague to our left or our right. It's a government document. It's a binding contract. And if you already have the funds, get to the bottom of whether you really have been, if you're, the funds that have been deactivated, people don't have access to. Those accounts have been blocked. The things have been removed from the internet. So if you still have access, potentially you may be able to still work. I just think it means getting to the specifics of what is your particular situation and being clear to get answers, because it's a choice in how this thing is being implemented right now, with the main goal of fear and paralysis. So it's not an easy thing, but I just say challenge it, continue to challenge and ask questions.
I first of all, I agree with everything that Dr. Coley just said. What I will add is also, becoming aware of what the advocacy channels are. For example, next week, Attorney General Mays is hosting a forum to understand who's been impacted by some of these federal decisions, and just recognizing that there are other folks in government that are looking to figure out how to address this issue, not just on a state level, but on a federal level, because I think the impacts are wide reaching, right? And so I think historically, in the science community and the research community, we're often, because it is a generally somewhat neutral space, there isn't a whole lot of engagement from an advocacy perspective, but recognizing that this is, just in my field alone, right, they're getting rid of databases that all people use to conduct research, right? And so I think being able to engage now, but also recognizing that in less than 2 years, we have a critical election that could shift a lot of things if we are feeling that this is extremely problematic to the work that we do. We have a power in our vote. Historically, people don't engage in midterm elections the way that they do presidential elections. Well, maybe 2026 should show something different, and especially with the community that's being impacted by the ability to access grants and to conduct meaningful work and research that shapes what we do. I mean, I think that often, especially what Dr. Coley was saying, when we think about DEI, we ignore all the areas that DEI impacts beyond race and gender and sort of personal identifiers. We're talking about, persons with disability. We're talking about things that cover, health research, or, a lot of other things that are at people's everyday lives that are not, part of this conversation. And so those of us who have that knowledge and are doing that work, our voice needs to be heard in these spaces.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Coley. Next question. This is Stan AR from We Are You campaign. And speaking of systemic caste, how can the LGBTQIA visibility and voices get heard when we do not feel valued in our own communities? Is there someone who wants to lend to this one? Dr. Coley, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you say the question? I heard the last part of it. Can you state it again?
Yes. It says, this is Stan from We Are You campaign. And speaking of systemic caste, how can the LGBTQIA visibility and voices get heard when we do not feel valued in our own communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had put on some notes earlier that I really hope that intersectionality came up at some point in the conversation. To that question, I'll go back to the Combahee River Collective, which was a group back in like 74 that was a group of Black women, feminists, lesbians that were lost in the considerations, right? So women started being considered, but the focus was on white women. When men and women together, so white women and Black men still did not, there was still no resolve for Black women left in the middle of that, and thinking about the additional axes of sexuality, other marginalized identities, class, ability, being a veteran, these things, came into play. And so when your question about how to, what can the LGBTQ community do? I identify as a member of that community, and it is difficult because in some ways, in the realm of the professional world, you're too Black, and in the Black community, your sexuality is the thing that pushes gets you kind of discarded. And so I think that's a very real issue. I think that it is something that needs to be more brought to the forefront for conversation. I think there's often dichotomy around spirituality and sexuality and Blackness. And so then, that gets very complicated. But I don't know how, without, as a community and as a collective, being able to be open to embracing the difficult conversations, how we will overcome that. Because your question, what you said in your question, is true. We do face some of the greatest oppression, resistance, disowning from within our own community. And I will say that I think that is something that is handled very differently amongst other races and ethnicities. And so I don't know. I think that maybe when we have these types of forums, there needs to be more dialogue about that, and less silencing, and not addressing issues so that, like, if we don't talk about it, it just goes away.
And thank you so much for lending to that question, Dr. Coley. I think it's important to just continue to have these conversations. Awareness is the first step to change, and conversations are the first step to anybody changing their minds as well. And so the softening of folks' hearts, I think, is where we can do the most work right now. So being authentic and genuine and keep having these conversations is going to be the start to more inclusion in our community with our intersectional identities and those big academic words. All right, so Ms. Burdetta, you wanted to link to this one?
Only thing I want to say is I think that it's so much more hope with the next generation because they see things differently than we did. They come into a world that is not the biggest question out there anymore. So I think that with us, as in our generation, we have to become the learners again and learn and accept it, because in the Black culture, it has been something that's been stigmatized, like, you don't talk about that. That's something that you don't talk about. So that's something as my generation and all the generations that are, I would say, above Gen X, because I'm a Gen Xer, that's something that I think that we are learning to do. But I think in the generations that are younger than us, that's not as big of an issue. Like, that is not something that someone's sitting there, because I'm on the dais right now when I'm on the governing board, and I have someone who just graduated 3 years ago from high school on there. And when we talk about that, it's a whole different way from the culture that he talks about it versus how the generations above us talk about it, when the ones in my generation. So I think it's a learning process for us, especially as Black African Americans. We have to put it out there that is something that was not talked about around the dinner table. And it was not something that so in my generation, I feel a little bit different than my parents, but I wasn't going to talk about it. So I think now, I have a lot of hope being with my high school students all the time, seeing the next generation, that's not going to be as big as an issue as it is right now.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Hodge, for sharing your thoughts around that. Question here from Bridget. I'm sorry, I won't read names. Anyways, question is, can a list be put together of resources that will educate us, the people, on what we can do to make a difference? The lack of knowledge plays a big part. Director McPherson, do you want to add to this one? I know that we are working on some things from the commission to lend to this.
Yes, so thank you for the question. And yes, we are compiling a list of not only not only resources, but organizations. So again, kind of giving my statewide perspective. We want to know who's doing the work, what programs they offer, what part of the region or what part of the state they support. So we are undergoing this. It will be an evergreen project to kind of compile this list of organizations, but in addition to that, resources, whether it's educational or fall within any of our pillars. It is underway. I've been enrolled for just over 4 months. So one of the rocks, I won't tell you the size of the rock right now, but one of the rocks we are looking to gather in my tenure. So for that, I would say just visit our website, join our mailing list, website azcaaa.az.gov, azcAA.az.gov, and it's Arizona C AAA across all social media platforms. I would invite you all to just connect with us and just kind of follow along on the ride, and actually not just follow along on the ride, but contribute to the ride that we are on. And so that will a resource we are working on. And I hope that as awareness of what we are working on, kind of spreads, it will, the growth of it will grow exponentially. So I'll just offer that.
Yeah, I'll just plug also pillar talks that the commission hosts on a monthly basis via live stream on all the social media platforms as well. So if you haven't followed the commission on social media, please follow. We have our next pillar talk happening on Thursday, March 20th. All right, thank you so much for answering those questions. Next question. I'm a state level educator / administrator with over 10 years of experience in K-12 education. I would like to get more involved in civic engagement and educational policies and legislation. Do you all have any suggestions for where I can get more informed and involved?
I do. That was going to be one of the first things I wanted to talk about. I would think the first thing you need to get involved in is find out your local education and go into the governing board meetings, because you don't even have to be at the meetings. You can go to the agenda. Everything that's going to happen within your community is going to happen on that agenda. Get involved with what's happening on public schools, because I guarantee you, what's on those public schools agenda is usually what the state legislator is working on at the same time, because our funding, everything about us is connected. Do your research, sit down with your state legislator, find out who your state legislator is, just do some research on them, find out what their agenda is, what their objectives are, what are their passions about. Because if education is not on there, if they're not talking about it, then that tells you a whole big story on what they're about. Because if they don't have anything saying that I am a supporter of education, I'm doing this or that for it, then you already know that that's not their main focus of their attention. And that's something that you can address with them, because you have the right to vote them in. You have the right to also to vote them out. So just get involved with your politics. Find out on every level, from school board, city council, state legislature, Congress, everybody. Find out what's going on. That's the best way to get involved.
And I think adding to that, at the state level. So for instance, the state Senate Education Committee meets on Wednesdays. You can go on the azledge.gov and look and see what's on the agenda, what folks are talking about. Go listen in. There's a request to speak option, right, in terms of being able to speak up on issues that are important. But then I encourage people to look at nonpartisan organizations, right, that are generally more issue-based, like Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. Every Sunday, they do kind of like a coffee shop talk gathering where you can kind of learn and engage, and even like at a basic level, understand what advocacy can look like with whatever issues are important to you. But I think especially looking locally within your community, as Council Member Hodge has said, is definitely key. And any of them, like all board meeting stuff is public. So any school districts that you're seeing, obviously lately school districts have been in the news and the media in Arizona. Looking up any of that, all of that is public information.
Director McPherson?
Yes, and given the answers, I have some context, but if you don't mind, can you repeat the question?
Yes, sorry about that. I had to scroll back up. So the question says, I'm a state level educator / administrator with over 10 years of experience in K-12 education. I would like to get more involved in civic engagement and educational policies and legislation. Do you have any suggestions for where I can get more informed and involved?
Yes, so this will go beyond specific to education, but I would strongly encourage, in line with what Commissioner Councilmember Hart shared, was getting involved with the local school boards. But boards and commissions is something I've been echoing over the past few months. Right now, Arizona, amongst the litany of boards and commissions that exist, there are a total of 2,000 seats. Last I checked, there are roughly 400 seats that are either open or occupied by people whose seats have expired. Boards and commissions is where, whether it is the African American Affairs is a commission, whether it could be industry related, it could be ethnic group related, it could be specialty related, it can be real estate. Like, there are boards and commissions comprised of experts and professionals in the field who are meeting regularly to discuss the industry, to discuss laws that may impact it, to discuss initiatives, to come to a consensus, to pursue legislation with the elected officials. I would encourage you all to explore boards and commissions, and it doesn't have to be limited to the state. Your city, your county, they all have boards and commissions that gives you a seat at the table, whether it's your local neighborhood or whether it's an industry that you're part of, where it gives you a seat at the table to have your voices heard, to connect with other subject matter experts, to help shape your government, help shape, the policies and initiatives that will impact your life. So I would encourage you all to explore becoming a part of a boarding commission, and if not serving on a boarding commission, attending some of those monthly meetings, because those are open to the public as well, to give you an inside look on how again, policy initiatives are being shaped and formed that will ultimately affect your lives. So I was all for that.
Thank you, Executive Director McPherson. I did drop in the chat the website for the commission and also the website to look up what those boards and commissions are here in the state of Arizona. Again, the website for the commission is azcaaa.az.gov. And for boards and commissions, it's bc.azgovernor.gov/BC. Then you'll get the list. All right, next question. I listened to the 2-month update from Senator Ruben Gallego last night, and he basically said it's scary and offered no real solutions or hope. What can we do as individuals and council members, in addition to praying, to stop this destruction by the current administration? Anyone?
Well, yeah, I'd like to try to address that question. We have to understand that any advances we've had as a people of color, as Black people, relates to justice and civil rights, we had to fight for. We have to relaunch resistance movements. We cannot turn our head the other way. Look at the strategy of the civil rights movement. First, the first strategy that Dr. King and others used were to make known what the issue is, what the injustice is. And then the next strategy was to try to negotiate with the powers that be. So as much as we dislike what is coming down from the White House and the State House, we need to get into rooms where these people are and let them know how we feel this is unjust, this is unfair, this is un-American, it is not representing everything you say that America is. And then if that step does not work, of course, you gather people, you galvanize people, you form coalitions to get as many people as possible. Then when that doesn't work, I mean, you move to other more aggressive, nonviolent means of protest and marches, boycotts, etc. But you listen. This is not the time to be silent. This is the time to speak up, to stand up, and call it what it is. I told our congregation Sunday that DEI is the new N-word. And I told that to a white evangelical pastor yesterday in a lunch he invited me to, and he turned red. Well, I certainly can't say that to my people. Well, you may not say it, but when you see by the stroke of a pen, getting rid of DEI, all of that, what that is saying, getting rid of black people, getting rid of people of color. Call it what it is. Liberation movements have always been resistance movements. Don't The MAGA movement is not apologizing for what they believe. The people who put together Project 2025 are not apologizing. So why do we have to try to be diplomatic and try to be polite? The devil with that. Excuse me.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. I forgot where I was for a moment. Okay. Anyone else want to lend to this question? I wouldn't either. Okay. All right, next question. Listen, carefully curated panelists. How, as a community, can we begin to link together across the country? Anyone? Moments like this? I mean, I know this is a webinar and we are talking at you instead of engaged in a circle discussion, but we have a lot of virtual experiences where there is a circle discussion. So I would say whenever you can get, I'm not on the panel, I'm the moderator, but I'll say anytime you can get in community with folks, even if it's virtually, show up. Dr. Armstrong?
I actually want to push back a little on the question in the sense that, yeah, we need, uniting across the country, but we got to start with uniting locally, right? We got to start right at home, right? And having these conversations more frequently in our spaces that we have autonomy and control over, and really coming together in that real way, and really pushing in that way. I think there was another comment or question in the Q&A that similarly talked about that, like really exploring some of these divides that exist within our local community, having real conversation and building those coalitions to address that within our state.
Yeah, that's true. If we can't come together in a local space, then how can we come together across a larger spectrum? We have to be united in a voice when we start going into these spaces. And if we look like we're dysfunctional on a local scale, how are we going to ever come together as a larger community?
Yeah,
Virtual spaces, lots of circles. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, so I agree wholeheartedly with Doc Rock that the focus should be kind of the local. But out of respect for the question, I will provide an answer for that. And so my answer to that will be starting locally, and once that is solidified, then you will be able to speak as a collective, unified voice to engage with other local entities and local leaderships who share ideologies, who share, passions, and can come together on a national level. But obviously, and certainly work locally, and then solidify that. And then we can look nationally. But what I find to be effective is going to national conferences, and there may be barriers to that: cost, travel, time. Again, the economic, barriers that I mentioned to civic engagement previously in the conversation. But I found, great success going to conferences like CBC, particularly National Urban League Conference, to help find like minds and share ideas of what's happening on the ground in their area and borrow from that. So, but we need to start locally. We need to start today.
No, I agree. There's a lot of professional organizations that are Black-led and Black-run that host national annual conferences like ASALA, which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the National Association of Black Social Workers, the Association of Black Psychologists, ABSI. There are so many professional organizations. So if you are not a part of it and you want to find one, they're out there. There's also a lot of circle experiences on the local level. If you look at Phoenix Soul, if you're here in Phoenix, check the Phoenix Soul website. There's a lot of events that get shared there as well. All right, so we have two last questions for you, Pastor Stewart. And I'm just going to read them both off so you can lend to them. Then we do have some other things in the questions that I'll read off for the sake of the video, and then we'll get into our final thoughts. So first question is for Pastor Stewart. How do you see younger leaders in the Black church taking the lead in civic engagement matters today? That's the first one.
If we just look at a sense of history, the civil rights movement was led by young Black people, and it was birthed in the Black church. So we have a sense of history. Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, the men and women who were leading the civil rights movement, they were all young adults. And they saw God as a God of justice, God as a God of liberty and equality, and was on the side of the oppressed. They looked at Jesus Christ as a radical revolutionary. And so what some colleagues and I are doing, we're trying to wake up the Black church again. The Black churches over the last 30 years post-civil rights have been like Rip Van Winkle, and they've gotten involved in the health and wealth prosperity movement about I, myself, and me, bigger car, bigger house, girlfriend, boyfriend, all that kind of stuff. And so we're trying to wake up the Black church to come back to who we always have been, how we started. I mean, the way the Black church started in the United States of America was because Black Christians were treated unfairly when they worship in white churches. And they said, well, we're not welcome in a white church. We're going to start our own Black church. So the Black church was started as a liberating, resistant movement. So we're trying to get people to come back to that. So, and young people led that. And we apologize. I apologize on behalf of my generation and the generation below me that did not communicate effectively and persuasive enough to our young generation to get them to understand why the Black church is so important. The Black church is the most independent prophetic voice in the Black community. Even today, even though it's been silent and quiet, it has, in most Black churches, have no strings attached. The government can't shut us down. We can speak truth to power. And the Black Lives Movement kind of was the voice when the church was silent. So we can kind of link you talk about coalition building. If we can link the Black Lives Matters movement and the Black church together, ain't no stopping us. Ain't no stopping us. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, Pastor Stewart, thank you for that. I think it also lends to answering this next question as well that says, Reverend Stewart, will it take a Victory Together 2.0 to push back against the DEI rollbacks? And how can we create the new coalition?
Well, again, I think in the previous question, not just then, again, and I'm 73 years old. I'm tired, but I'm not so tired that I'm not willing to get back in the fight again. I mean, with the last breath that I have, if I have to, listen. I'm not going to take this. We have come too far. We've made too many advantages to let some narrow-minded, racist, white supremacist guided people to talk about we want to make America great again. What they mean, we want to make America white again. And I've been saying for years, as America has been browning, there's a circling of the wagons, and we have the power. God has given us the power. We have a historic strategy of the civil rights movement. We don't have to take this, and we can change this. I still have hope. I hope that answers that question.
It answers the question, Pastor Stewart, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the decades of work that you have put into this state, and not only this state, but for our community as a whole. You are the leading civil rights pastor in Arizona right now, and we are so grateful for you. I don't care if you're 73 or 23, you are doing the thing for us, and we are grateful. So thank you. All right, let me read these comments here, and then we will get to final thoughts for our panelists. So we have one here that says, as a mixed Latina, Black Native Arizonan, I would like to see our two Black and Brown communities unite in a stronger, more strategic way. That would create a greater advocacy, united voice, and a greater force in so many ways, including at the ballot box. Also, as a communicator, I see their cohesive anti-DEI messaging, and we need to create our own united and cohesive messaging campaigns about Black and Brown excellence and other messaging that will help our communities. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Diana. I was talking with Alberto, the executive director of our center, as we were preparing for this discussion, and he was sharing with me the historical situations with Cesar Chavez and other Hispanic leaders who consulted with Black leaders to prepare the movements that they started. I don't want to misquote what was said to me, but hopefully in Alberto's final thoughts, he'll share that as well. All right, a couple more comments to state. We had from Nikwana, who said, hope it's okay to post this just as a resource. As president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the first Black person statewide to hold the position, I will be hosting a community conversation next month focused on the diversification of funding sources for Black and Brown nonprofits in these difficult times. I will have reps from all of the major foundations in the Valley, as well as a panel of Black, Latino, and Indigenous fundraisers. March 31st, 5:30 p.m. at the Nash. So we're creating a booklet for this webinar, and we will include that in the booklet as well. I think that was it for the comments that were shared. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts, for your contributions to this discussion, for engaging with the question and answers portion here. One more thing, we're not going to have time to answer this, but if our panelists want to answer it in the chat, please do so. But the question says, should we be talking with leadership of embedding social consciousness, action, and decisions as part of business, not in a program, but as part of organizations and business? That's a really good one. I think that as educators here, as an educator myself, I definitely am instilling that into my students as a lot of values and morals and ethics and strong foundation of who you are as an individual before you get into these spaces, specifically political spaces as well, because it's so easy to lose sight of who you are in these spaces. So a strong foundation and understanding of who you are, especially us as Black folks, as Black people, we do not have to conform in these environments. I hope I still have a job after this. Anyways, all right, thank you so much. Let's go into our panelists' final thoughts. Pastor Stewart, we're gonna save you for last. And we'll start with whoever wants to start. Go ahead, Executive Director McPherson.
Yeah, so thank you. Firstly, thank you, panelists, but specifically Pastor Stewart. As I was saying, you share your story. Certainly, you know, and have the chance to interact with you quite a bit. So, I want to thank you for not only sharing your testimony, but the work that that you've put in over the years. And you should be tired. It was a lot of work, and I am looking forward to kind of doing my part to fill that leadership gap that will inevitably exist, which will be a wide one. But just want to extend the invitation to connect with you sometime soon. Just realize, I know you're retiring from your position soon, but not retiring from leadership and or the Phoenix and Arizona community. Just want to, connect with you and absorb as much of that experience that you have, so I can better shape my leadership. But I wanted to also call out another thing that you and I was in a meeting last week with Mark Morial, National Urban League President. And when we were talking about leverage a bit earlier in the conversation, it was brought up that the NBA All-Star Game is coming to Arizona in 2027. So with someone mentioning, a 2.0, that is the next biggest leverage that exists as it pertains to the economic vehicle that comes through Arizona. So that might be something we can consider. The last thing I will say is, I'm a veteran, so I don't use this terminology lightly, but we are in nothing short of a war. And wars are fought on multiple fronts, and there are different regimes, different units that form the offensive. And whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's government agencies like myself, whether it's the church, we need to all do our part as a part of this battle. Like, everyone has a role to play, And we may not agree with the tactics that certain regiments take, but that's not for us to decide. It's for us to hope that they are effective in what they do, and then we can fill the gaps with what we're doing so that we can move this offensive forward. And that offensive is hopefully leading to equity and equality amongst our communities. So just want to call that out, and just no matter what organization you're a part of, no matter what that form it takes, just do your job and do it well, do it to the best of your ability, hold your comrades, still continue that analogy, hold them accountable. And, ultimately we look to see you at the finish line as we, kind of, win the things that we're fighting for. So thank you, and hope everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Executive Director McPherson. Cordero, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go. First, I just want to thank you, Tiff, Alberto, everybody at Ed Pastor for inviting me to be on this panel. Everybody on the panel, I'm privileged and I'm thankful to be here with you. And like Jerry had said, Pastor Warren Stewart, have fun, man. You retiring, and it's always a pleasure to get to see you and be in space with you, brother. I'll share this. Because one of the eighth question was about like inspiration, right? And what inspires you, what motivates you. And like I said, we have to support one another. We have to support one another. And Jerry had talked about, giving that head nod, embracing one another, acknowledging each other. We definitely need to do that. So, when you see a brother, when you see a sister, give him a head nod.
Thank you for that, Cordero. Dr. Armstrong, you want to go?
Yeah, so I think along with what Cordero has shared and Jerry has shared about one, that we're in this war, and it's not like wars have a timeline where we know when they're going to end. And along with support one another, one of the areas that we didn't touch on or get to was around the importance of self-care, and I will offer that self-care is activism. And it's activist in the sense that this war needs us to be present, but you can't be present if you're not whole, right? And so part of it requires us to take care of ourselves in the ways that keep us whole mentally, spiritually, physically. And sometimes that means that other folks have to hold space for you when you are absent from the movement, because we cannot carry the labor ourselves on our own backs. We've seen from prior generations that it will kill us if we do so. So it's important that we hold space for one another and support, but also that we take time to care for ourselves and to be unapologetic about that. And so that's what I would share.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Ms. Angela, do you want to give your final thought?
Yes. First of all, to mirror what everyone else has said, this has been a great experience. I've enjoyed seeing and renewing friendships. And of course, Pastor Stewart, it's always great to see you again after being gone so many years. But I would say the message I would impart today is we've got to do more of these, because there is so much going on around us that a lot of the stuff is slipping through the cracks. So I would say research, watch the news, the unbiased news as much as you can, but then don't let it become overwhelming. Take a walk, turn off the TV, disengage from social media, and just kind of like take a deep breath of fresh air to renew your spirit, and then go back at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Angela. Councilmember Hodge.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank everybody, all the panelists. Thank everybody for being here. Everybody in the audience who's going to listen, who will listen. Pastor Stewart, you've been a mentor for many, and that doesn't mean just because you think you're retired, meaning you're going to really retire. I don't believe that. I know you very well and know that that's not going to happen no time soon, because your work has not been done. God has not called you to stop. He just might call you to slow down. So continue on. For everybody else, this has been a phenomenal time. speaking from another point of view, like with elected office, everybody on this call, reach out to someone in office, especially reach out to your Black elected officials, because they have the hardest time in this world. I mean, it is not easy being a Black elected official in a state that only has a few of us. So, and also get involved. It's easy to say all the nice stuff, but get involved. This is your world. You have just as much power as everybody else. You have to be the change that you're looking for, and everybody can be that change that's being looking for. We talk about the future of our students, our generation. Give them something to look forward to. Stop telling them they need to come to the table. They're already at the table. They're sitting at the table, waiting on us to let them talk. Let them talk. Let their voices be heard. They can teach us. As we say, we want to be mentors to them, but some of them could be mentors to us. So learn, because history will completely repeat itself over and over again if we don't learn something from it. So I think that the learners need to be the teachers and the teachers need to be the learners. So just continue on that. And I wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day. And enjoy the rest of your time. And as everybody else said, we do need to do more of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hodge. All right, Pastor Stewart.
Thank you
Floor is
very
yours.
much. I thank God for all of you panelists who put this together and all of those who have been listening or who will be listening. I close with the words of James Weldon Johnson, the 3rd verse, and lift every voice and sing. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou hast brought us thus far on the way. Thou hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land. Amen.
Thank you so much for those final words, Pastor Stewart. And as you were saying that, I realized that we did not give our land acknowledgement here at Arizona State University before we started this webinar today. So Alberto, when you're giving your final thoughts, if you could just give a little blessing for the land as well. Yes, please. And then I'll close this out. Oh no, Alberto, sorry.
Oh, Albert, good.
Thanks for the reminder, Tiffany. Yes, being part of Arizona State University and all of our campuses, we traditionally do start off by acknowledging that our campuses, the communities we serve, are located on lands that traditionally have been home to many tribes, 22 current recognized tribes and several other unrecognized ones that call this land home, and in particular the Optum and Acamel and Peeposh peoples on this specific area. But our version of that acknowledgement takes pains to describe these communities as living current communities. Because sometimes when we hear these land acknowledgements, it can sound past tense. And that's very much not what we want to portray, that our tribal brothers and sisters and relatives are very much present tense. Part of these conversations need to be included in these discussions about our future and a vision for Arizona that is more just and is more beautiful. So thank you for that prompt. And thanks to the panelists for your beautiful and inspiring thoughts. It makes me think of discussions I've had very recently with students here and in Texas. I just got back from Houston, where I encourage them to think about the fact that small acts of courage can inspire others to be courageous. So all of us doing our little part to be courageous in unsettling times can really start a fire that leads to other things. And I was having this conversation with Tiffany about how so much of the Latino and Hispanic civil rights efforts in Arizona and in the Southwest from the 50s and 60s were inspired and informed directly by the Black civil rights movement. Cesar Chavez and others really met and consulted often with Martin Luther King Jr. and all of those folks that helped consult and create and invent these strategies, resistance strategies, and community unification strategies. That led to all the incredible work that was done to really advocate and unify agricultural workers in the Southwest. I could go on and on. But the point is we accomplish more when we act together. And that's a lesson I started learning in the 90s when I was with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We never got more done than when we linked arms with the Black Chamber and the American Indian Chamber and the Women's Chamber and on and on. We were able to get so much accomplished by starting with identifying what our common challenges were with schools, with small business issues, and so forth. As coalitions, we were incredibly powerful in ways that we could never be individually. So I think we keep learning that lesson. I take great inspiration from everything our panelists have shared, and I hope our participants have as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for your final thoughts, for allowing this opportunity to occur as the executive director of the Pastor Center. Whew. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone who spent the last 2 hours and 4 minutes with us. And those of you who are watching the replay on YouTube, this discussion was powerful, very necessary, and very needed. And there was a question that we didn't get to, and it's how do you balance activism and self-care? And I want to impart that to us before we leave here today. Balance is necessary, and balance is so important. We are no good for anyone else if we're no good for ourselves. It is okay to say no sometimes. You don't have to show up to everything, but where you do show up authentically. Give it your all and ensure that what you're doing is connected to your heart and to your passion. But take care of yourself as well. There's a term called revolutionary suicide, and many of us in the Black community are walking revolutionaries. We are walking liberators. We spend every moment when we wake up and every moment till we go to sleep thinking about how we can make change, thinking about how we can impact the community, how we can heal the community, and how we can bring necessary, needed resources to our people. You also are valuable, and you also need those resources. So please continue to take care of yourself. Whether it's 5 minutes a day of intentionally just sitting down and breathing, do that for yourself. Slow down sometimes. I know that you have to keep going and going and going, and you have to give yourself permission to slow down. Well, give yourself that permission to slow down every once in a while, because we need you. We need you in this fight, and your voice matters. So again, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everyone who is here today. And we will see you next time. We will be bringing you our women's perspectives in March. So please stay tuned for that, and we will be in touch. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.